y'all? It is Thursday, April 9th, and I am here today to talk to you about what Number the Stars is going to look like starting today on April 9th and going until May 20th. Just so you know, this is subject to change based on our current situation. So here's the deal. We're doing Number the Stars no matter what. We would have been doing Number the Stars if we were in school. We're going to be doing Number the Stars outside of school through remote learning as well. But I want to give you a breakdown on what it's going to look like because I think that this will be easier for you to kind of process everything. I know it might seem overwhelming at first, but once I explain this to you, it's going to make perfect sense. So I've broken this down for you and what's going to happen daily, weekly, and throughout the entire unit. So what to kind of expect at the end, what to expect at the end of each week, and what to expect daily. So let's start with the daily. All right. So on the daily, here's what is going to happen. Either I am going to be reading a chapter to you, or you will be required to read a chapter on your own. Now, in what I shared with you today, you got a PDF version of Number the Stars. That is what you are going to have to use as your book. That's the best that we could do, but I think it will work. Every day, I'm going to introduce you to a skill. So today, we are going to be reading chapter 1. I'm actually going to read it to you using a video. So I'm going to read chapter 1 of Number the Stars to you today. There will be times that you'll be expected to read on your own, and you can do that with someone at home. You could even FaceTime a friend, and you guys could read together if you want to. Every day, I will introduce you to a skill. Now, these are going to be skills that we have probably already talked about. Today's skill is comparing and contrasting, which is something we've talked about during the school year. Then also each day I will introduce you to the word of the day. So let me show you this. Okay, this paper right here, and let me back this up a bit, is our words of the week for Number the Stars week 1. There are 5 words total. You are going to be responsible for these 5 words on the quiz at the end of the week. But each day I will pick one word to kind of make my word of the day, and then that will be what is used as that word of the day on the daily. So today's word is lanky, and lanky means tall and thin. So if we're referring to someone lanky, we're referring to someone that is tall and thin. Do you know anybody that's lanky? Can you think of a word that would be an antonym for lanky? So what would be the opposite of being tall and thin or lanky? So these are the types of things that we'll be doing with these vocabulary words. 1 per day, but you'll have the entire group of words that you'll be responsible for at the end of the week, okay? And then also on the daily, you will have to complete an exit ticket. The exit ticket is usually fairly simple, maybe 2-3 questions, sometimes only 1 question. And I will be grading you on that exit ticket using this scale, a 2-1-0. So a 2 means you have done an outstanding job, you've met my expectations, you have answered all the questions, you followed directions, and everything is making perfect sense to me. A 1 means there was a little bit of an issue somewhere. Maybe not following directions, maybe not being clear on your answer, but you still answered it and I could tell that you tried. A 0 would be maybe it was left blank or there is absolutely no effort being shown here. So this is on the daily. So let me make sure that you understand. Every day I'm either going to read a chapter to you or you are going to read a chapter on your own. Or like I said, maybe with a family member or even FaceTiming a friend, you guys can read together. I'll introduce you to a skill, like today's is comparing and contrasting. I'll introduce you to a word, like today's is lanky, meaning tall and thin. And then you will have to complete an exit ticket. That's what we're going to do every day. Now going on to weekly. You are going to be then responsible at the end of the week to do a Google form quiz. I will be sharing that with you. That quiz will be over the assigned chapters that either I read or you were supposed to read for the week. And then I'll be grading you on comprehension of the information in the chapters that were read, and I'll be grading you on those vocabulary words for the week. So those would be those 5 words or sometimes more than 5 that I showed you, this paper, okay? You'll also get a Quizlet. So at the beginning of the week, I will share a Quizlet with you over the words that you will be expected to know. And then you can expect about every 2 weeks for there to be a graded writing activity. And it's usually going to be something small, maybe a paragraph every 2 weeks that you'll have to write. And it will be something based on Number the Stars. Okay? Then at the end of the entire unit, you will be responsible for 2 things. 1, completing an open book, open note final test. That, of course, will be graded. And then your ABC slideshow, which I shared with you, your own copy, so you'll be able to get started on that pretty soon. Students will complete the ABC slideshow, and you'll be graded using the rubric that's in the slideshow. So that breaks down Number the Stars into daily, weekly, and unit assessments. Okay, so what's going to happen on the daily, what will happen at the end of the week, or in this case, like the Quizlet will be at the beginning of the week, and then the Google Forms quiz will be at the end of the week, which, by the way, this will be open book and open note also, and then what happens at the end of the unit. So just so you know, as of now, if we end up staying home and remote learning ends up lasting longer than we even anticipate, the end of book test will be probably around May 15th. And then your slideshow, your ABC slideshow, would be due around May 20th, okay? Your first chapter is going to happen today. I'm introducing you to the skill today, comparing and contrasting. I'm introducing you to the word of the day, that's lanky, and you will complete the Google exit ticket today, all right? So that's kind of what today looks like. Weekly, we're not even going to worry about this until the end of the week next week. I'll give you your Quizlet today so you can start studying that if you want to, but no quiz until the end of next week and no writing assignment for a little while. And then, of course, you can always be working on your slideshow. I hope that made sense to you. I made this so that it would make things a little bit easier for you. I hope that it didn't make it more difficult. All right, so what we're going to do right now is move on to our skill for today, and the skill is comparing and contrasting. And what better way to review a skill than through vocabulary? Oh yes, let's go.
Vocabulary. We're comparing and contrasting. Let's get it. Everybody's doing it. In fact, we do it all the time. We compare and contrast when we're in the store, deciding what cereal to buy. We compare and contrast when we pick up what movie to see, or what player we want for our fantasy football league. I'll break it down for you. Comparing and contrasting. Get with it. That's when you think how things are similar and different. When I compare things, I talk about how they're the same. When I contrast, it's the differences that I name. I analyze how they're similar and different. I look at them close. Yeah, I get specific. I compare and contrast 2 books, 3 foods, 2 unicorn dudes named Movie and Sue. Yeah, that's how we do. But what's even wiser, before I write, I'ma use a graphic organizer. A Venn diagram, yeah, I'll show you that. I just draw 2 circles that overlap. In the middle, I'll write whatever's the same. Just list the differences in the other spaces. With 3 things to compare, what should I do then? I could add a 3rd circle, so then let's get it in. I compare when I say how things are similar, like doll houses and ponies, both miniature. I contrast when I say how things are different, give examples and get specific. You get it? I compare when I say how things are similar, or the same. Yeah, I bet that sounds so familiar. I contrast when I say how things are different, give examples and get specific. Okay, I have to write an essay. Here's the prompt. Would you rather be a wolf or a domesticated dog? Domesticated dog is like a pet. I'ma compare and contrast. That'll help me think. I use transition words to help my readers know that I'm comparing and contrasting. Here we go. First, I'll compare how they're the same. Both have fur coats for the wind, snow, and rain. Domesticated dogs love to play together. Similarly, wolf puppies will play in any weather. Pet dogs have paws. Wolves do as well. Likewise, they both will eat meat. Can you tell? It's the See how they're different? Let's contrast. Most wolves have longer teeth, and that's a fact. If a wolf gets sick, there's no medicine. In contrast, best go to the vet. They let him in. Domesticated dogs don't worry about food. They get fed in the bowl. I bet they love it too. Unlike a wolf, which has to hunt, and if it can't find much food, they go hungry for months. A wolf can run free, do anything it pleases, while domesticated doggies are tied up with leashes. So while I might like to be a pet dog for a while, I want to be free. That's the call of the wild. I compare when I say how things are similar, like doll houses and ponies, both miniature. I contrast when I say how things are different, give examples and get specific. You get it? I compare when I say how things are similar, or the same. Yeah, I bet that sounds so familiar. I contrast when I say how things are different, give examples and get specific. Get it?
All right, there we go. So, vocabulary through remote learning. I love it. All right, so I am actually going to now move on to the next thing that we're going to do, which is going to be review the word of the day, lanky, which means tall and thin, and read chapter 1 of Number the Stars. So if you would like to follow along with me, now would be a great time to pause the video and to go to that PDF of Number the Stars. And when you do that, and actually I have that even on my computer so I can show you. My PDF is right here. Here's Number the Stars. This is what I shared with you. And it's a little different than just flipping through the pages of the book. I understand that, but it's still all here. So everything that I'm going to be reading you today and everything that I'm going to expect for you to be able to read is going to come from this right here online. So we're going to start with the introduction today, which is short, and then we're going to go on to chapter 1, Why Are You Running? So you can pause your video now, bring this up on your computer, and then you can go back to the video. You could do the split screen, so you can have your book on one side and then the video of me reading on the other side so you can follow along. Hi, let's get started on the introduction and chapter 1 of Number the Stars. So the introduction is Lois Lowry talking to you, her audience. This is her way to connect her feelings and her information to you, the audience. But this is different than a prologue, so make sure that we're clear on that. An introduction is written where the author is actually intending to talk to you. It's from her point of view. So this would be first person point of view. And she wants to give you a little bit of background where she was coming from as an author before she wrote the story or while she was writing the story. A prologue is more about the story, but it is the author's way of hooking you into the story and giving you a little bit of information about the characters, kind of giving you a chance to do some foreshadowing. This is not like that. So we're going to start with the introduction, and then we'll stop, we'll talk for a second, and we'll move on to chapter 1. Don't forget, today's word of the day is lanky. Lanky means... Did you get it? Tall and thin. So this word is used in chapter 1, lanky. So when you hear it in chapter 1, make sure you kind of make notice of it. All right, here we go. The introduction. It's hard to believe that I wrote Number the Stars more than 20 years ago. It seems like yesterday that I answered the phone on a snowy January morning and received the news that it had been awarded the 1990 Newbery Medal. Okay, now folks, listen. She said 1990 was more than 20 years ago. Well, 1990 to 2000 would be 10 years. 2000 to 2010 would be 10 years. And then 2010 to 2020 is 30 years. So this is now 30 years ago that she received the news that she won the Newbery Medal for this book. But good literature lasts forever. 30 years, 50 years, 100 years, doesn't matter. Good literature lasts forever. Most books published that long ago have faded into a pleasant, undisturbed retirement on dusty library shelves or become an occasional topic for a research paper. But Number the Stars seems to have acquired its own long and vibrant life. Not a day goes by that I don't hear from a passionate reader of the book. Some of them parents who remembered it from their childhood and are now reading it with their own children. I think readers of every age match themselves against the protagonists of books they love. Remember, protagonist means the character in the book that's kind of like the good guy. The protagonist is the character that you're rooting for, compared to the antagonist that's the character that's kind of like the bad guy, like your darker character, your evil character. And this would be the person that you're rooting usually against. Okay, so protagonists we're rooting for, antagonists we're rooting against. Think about that with Tuck Everlasting. The protagonist was Winnie Foster, Jesse Tuck. The antagonist, the person that we were kind of against, yeah, the man in the yellow suit. So you get the idea. Would I have done that? They ask themselves as they follow a fictional character through a novel. What choice would I have made? And I think we did that even in Tuck Everlasting and in Shiloh when we talked about Marty. So we're going to be doing that in this book as well. We're going to be putting our own selves in the shoes of these characters as they kind of go through their life. What would we do if we were them? Would we handle the situations in the same way? And 10, the age of Anne-Marie and Number the Stars, and the approximate age of most of the book's readers, true, well, except for me, but that's okay. I love this book. I'll own it. Is an age when young people are beginning to develop a strong set of personal ethics. They want to be honorable people. They want to do the right thing, and they are beginning to realize that the world they live in is a place where the right thing is often hard, sometimes dangerous, and frequently unpopular. So they follow a story about a girl their age caught in a frightening situation who must make decisions. She could take the easy way out. She could turn her back on her friend. As the readers of Number the Stars grow older and read other Holocaust literature, they'll find that many people in other countries, not Denmark, but other countries did just that. Young readers rejoice when Anne-Marie takes a deep breath, enters the wood, and faces danger, stands up to the enemy, and triumphs. When the book was newly published, it found its way into the hands and hearts of children who had read about but never experienced war. Now, sadly, I have heard from young readers who have lost a parent or an older brother in Iraq or Afghanistan. We all know how easy it is and how futile to blame and to hate. I think the history of Denmark has much to teach us all. The book has been published in many countries now, translated into countless different languages, from Hungarian to Hebrew. Everywhere children are still reading about the integrity that a small Scandinavian population showed almost 70 years ago. Books do change lives, I know, and many readers have told me that Number the Stars changed theirs when they were young, that it made them think about both cruelty and courage. It was something that shaped my idea of how people should be treated, wrote a young woman recently, recalling her own 4th grade experience with the book. The Danish friend who originally told me the story of her childhood in Copenhagen in 1943, and who became the prototype for the fictional Anne-Marie, is an old woman now. So am I. We both love thinking of the children reading the story today, coming to it for the first time and realizing that once, for a brief time, in a small place, a group of prejudice-free people honored the humanity of others. And Lois Lowry signs the introduction. So she really was kind of just talking to you, the audience. So here's what I get from this introduction. The most important parts that I want you to know. 1, this book is historical fiction. It takes place during World War II in 1943 in Copenhagen, Denmark. So Copenhagen is like the capital of the country of Denmark, kind of like Washington, D.C. is the capital of the United States of America. And the friend of Lois Lowry, who told her this story, who kind of told her about her life growing up in Denmark, is what gave her the ideas to write the story Number the Stars. And if you look at the, and I have to go back to it. If you look at the dedication page, Lois Lowry actually says right here, for her friend. And her friend's name is Annalise Platt. And we are going to actually find that there's a character that is named after this friend. Kind of two characters named after this friend. Remember, the friend's name is Annalise Platt. Keep that in mind. All right, here we go. Chapter 1. Why are you running? I'll race you to the corner, Ellen. Anne-Marie adjusted the thick leather pack on her back so that her school books balanced evenly. Ready? She looked at her best friend. Ellen made a face. No, she said, laughing. You know I can't beat you. My legs aren't as long. Can't we just walk like civilized people? She was a stocky 10-year-old, unlike lanky Anne-Marie. Little light bulb, lanky, tall and thin, and then it gave an antonym. It said she, meaning Ellen. Ellen made a face. She was a stocky 10-year-old, unlike lanky Anne-Marie. So if we're using the word unlike, that means that we're showing a difference between lanky, tall and thin, and stocky. So because these two words are antonyms, stocky must mean maybe on the shorter side, maybe a little bit heavier. And that makes sense. So you have Anne-Marie as a character who's described as tall and thin, and Ellen is a character who's described as stocky, so it meaning a little bit shorter and thicker. But Anne-Marie wants to run, Ellen just wants to chill out and walk. We have to practice for the athletic meet on Friday. I know I'm going to win the girls' race this week. I was second last week, but I've been practicing every day. Come on, Ellen, Anne-Marie pleaded, eyeing the distance to the next corner of the Copenhagen street. Please? Ellen hesitated, then nodded and shifted her own rucksack of books against her shoulders. Oh, all right. Ready, she said. Go, shouted Anne-Marie, and the two girls were off, racing along the residential sidewalk. Anne-Marie's silvery blonde hair flew behind her, and Ellen's dark pigtails bounced against her shoulders. Wait for me, wailed little Kirsty, left behind, but the two older girls weren't listening. Anne-Marie outdistanced her friend quickly, even though one of her shoes came untied as she sped along the street called Osterbrigade. Past the small shops and cafes of her neighborhood here in northeast Copenhagen. Laughing, she skirted an elderly lady in black who carried a shopping bag made of string. A young woman pushing a baby in a carriage moved aside to make way. The corner was just ahead. Anne-Marie looked up, panting, just as she reached the corner. Her laugh stopped. Her heart seemed to skip a beat. Halt! The soldier ordered in a stern voice. The German word was as familiar as it was frightening. Anne-Marie had heard it often enough before, but it had never been directed at her until now. Behind her, Ellen also slowed and stopped. Far back, little Kirsty was plodding along, her face in a pout because the girls hadn't waited for her. Anne-Marie stared up. There were two of them. That meant two helmets, two sets of cold eyes glaring at her, and four tall, shiny boots planted firmly on the sidewalk, blocking her path to home. And it meant two rifles, gripped in the hands of the soldiers. She stared at the rifles first, then finally she looked into the face of the soldier who had ordered her to halt. Why are you running? The harsh voice asked. His Danish was very poor. 3 years, Anne-Marie thought with contempt. 3 years! They've been in our country, and still they can't speak our language? Well, I was racing with my friend, she answered politely. We have races at school every Friday, and I want to do well, so I... Her voice trailed away, the sentence unfinished. Don't talk so much, she told herself. Just answer them, that's all. She glanced back. Ellen was motionless on the sidewalk, a few yards behind her. Farther back, Kirsty was still sulking and walking slowly toward the corner. Nearby, a woman had come to the doorway of a shop and was standing silently, watching. One of the soldiers, the taller one, moved toward her. Anne-Marie recognized him as the one she and Ellen always called in whispers, the giraffe. Because of his height and the long neck that extended from his stiff collar, he and his partner were always on this corner. He prodded the corner of her backpack with the stock of his rifle. Anne-Marie trembled. "What is in here?" he asked loudly. From the corner of her eye, she saw the shopkeeper move quietly back into the shadows of the doorway out of sight. "School books," she answered truthfully. "Are you a good student?" the soldier asked. He seemed to be sneering. "Yes." "What is your name?" "Anne-Marie Johansson." "Your friend, is she a good student too?" He was looking beyond her at Ellen, who hadn't moved. Anne-Marie looked back too and saw that Ellen's face, usually rosy cheek, was pale, and her dark eyes were wide. She nodded at the soldier. "Mm-hmm. Better than me," she said. "What is her name?" "Ellen." "And who is this?" he asked, looking at Anne-Marie's side. Kirsty had appeared there suddenly, scowling at everyone. "My little sister." She reached down for Kirsty's hand, but Kirsty, always stubborn, refused it and put her hands on her hips defiantly. The soldier reached down and stroked her little sister's short, tangled curls. "Stand still, Kirsty," Anne-Marie ordered silently, praying that somehow the obstinate 5-year-old would receive the message. But Kirsty reached up and pushed the soldier's hand away. "Don't!" she said loudly. Both soldiers began to laugh. They spoke to each other in rapid German that Anne-Marie couldn't understand. "She is pretty, like my own little girl," the tall one said in a more pleasant voice. Anne-Marie tried to smile politely. "Go home, all of you. Go study your school books and don't run. You look like hoodlums when you run." The two soldiers turned away. Quickly, Anne-Marie reached down again and grabbed her sister's hand before Kirsty could resist. Hurrying the little girl along, she rounded the corner. In a moment, Ellen was beside her. They walked quickly, not speaking, with Kirsty between them, toward the large apartment building where both families lived. When they were almost home, Ellen whispered suddenly, "I was so scared." "Me too," Anne-Marie whispered back. As they turned to enter their building, both girls looked straight ahead toward the door. They did it purposely so that they would not catch the eyes or the attention of 2 more soldiers who stood with their guns on this corner as well. Kirsty scurried ahead of them through the door, chattering about the picture she was bringing home from kindergarten to show Mama. For Kirsty, the soldiers were simply part of the landscape, something that had always been there on every corner, as unimportant as lampposts throughout her remembered life. "Are you going to tell your mother?" Ellen asked Anne-Marie as they trudged together up the stairs. "I'm not. My mother would be upset." "Nope, I won't either," said Anne-Marie. "Mama would probably scold me for running on the street." She said goodbye to Ellen on the 2nd floor where Ellen lived and continued on to the 3rd floor, practicing in her mind a cheerful greeting for her mother, a smile, a description of today's spelling test in which she had done well. But she was too late. Kirsty had gotten there first, and he poked Anne-Marie's book bag with his gun. "And then he grabbed my hair," Kirsty was chattering as she took off her sweater in the center of the apartment living room. "But I wasn't scared. Anne-Marie was, and Ellen too, but not me." Mrs. Johansson rose quickly from the chair by the window where she'd been sitting. Mrs. Rosen, Ellen's mother, was there too in the opposite chair. They'd been having coffee together as they did many afternoons. Well, of course it wasn't really coffee, though the mother still called it that, having coffee. There had been no real coffee in Copenhagen since the beginning of the Nazi occupation. Not even any real tea. The mother sipped at hot flavor with Sorry guys, Max is barking. The mother sipped at hot water flavored with herbs. "Anne-Marie, what happened? What is Kirsty talking about?" her mother asked anxiously. "Where's Ellen?" Mrs. Rosen had a frightened look. "Ellen's in your apartment. She didn't realize you were here, Anne Marie explained. Don't worry, it wasn't anything. It was the 2 soldiers who stand on the corner of Austria Brigade. You've seen them. You know, the tall one with the long neck, the one who looks like a silly giraffe. She told her mother and Mrs. Rosen of the incident, trying to make it sound humorous and unimportant. But their uneasy looks didn't change. I slapped his hand and shouted at him, Kirsty announced importantly. No, she didn't, Mama, Anne Marie reassured her mother. She's exaggerating, as she always does. Mrs. Johansson moved to the window and looked down to the street below. The Copenhagen neighborhood was quiet. It looked the same as always, people coming and going from the shops, children at play, the soldiers on the corner. She spoke in a low voice to Ellen's mother. They must be edgy because of the latest resistance incidents. Did you read De Frau Dansk about the bombings in Hillerød and Nuremberg? Although she pretended to be absorbed in unpacking her school books, Anne Marie listened, and she knew what her mother was referring to. De Free Dansk means the Free Danes, and it was an illegal newspaper that Peter Nielsen brought to them occasionally, carefully folded and hidden among ordinary books and papers. And Mama always burned it after she and Papa had read it. But Anne Marie heard Mama and Papa talk sometimes at night about the news they had received that way. News of sabotage against the Nazis, bombs that were hidden and exploded in factories that produced war materials, and industrial railroad lines damaged so that the goods couldn't be transported. And she knew what resistance meant. Papa had explained when she overheard the word and asked. The resistance fighters were Danish people. That's people of Denmark. No one knew who because they were very secret. Who were determined to bring harm to the Nazis however they could. They damaged the German trucks and cars and bombed their factories. They were very brave. Sometimes they were caught and killed. I must go speak to Ellen, Mrs. Rosen said, moving toward the door. You girls walk a different way home tomorrow. Promise me, Anne Marie. And Ellen will promise too. We will, Mrs. Rosen. But what does it matter? There are German soldiers on every corner. They will remember your faces, Mrs. Rosen said, turning in the doorway to the hall. It is important to be one of the crowd always. Be one of many. Be sure that they never have a reason to remember your face. She disappeared into the hall and closed the door behind her. He'll remember my face, Mama, Kirsty announced happily, because he said I look like his little girl. He said I was pretty. Well, if he has such a pretty little girl, why doesn't he go back home to her like a good father, Mrs. Johansson murmured, stroking Kirsty's cheek. Why doesn't he go back to his own country? Mama, is there anything to eat? Anne Marie asked, hoping to take her mother's mind away from the soldiers. Take some bread and give a piece to your sister. With butter? Kirsty asked hopefully. No butter, her mother replied. You know that. Kirsty sighed as Anne Marie went to the bread box in the kitchen. I wish I could have a cupcake, she said. A big yellow cupcake with pink frosting. Her mother laughed. Well, for a little girl, you have a long memory, she told Kirsty. There hasn't been any butter or sugar for cupcakes for a long time. A year, at least. When will there be cupcakes again? When the war ends, Mrs. Johansson said. She glanced through the window down to the street corner where the soldiers stood, their faces impassive beneath their metal helmets. When the soldiers leave. And that is the end of chapter 1. So tomorrow, actually strike that. Tomorrow there's nothing because it's Good Friday and we have no school. So on Monday, my video will start with a review of chapter 1 and what I think is most important for you to remember from chapter 1. Right now, you need to go on and do your exit ticket. Okay, so your exit ticket is 3 questions besides asking your name. It asks you to compare and contrast your life to the life of Anne Marie and Ellen. How is it alike and how is it different? It also asks a question about what you think Mrs. Rosen meant when the girls would be safer if their faces weren't remembered and they were just one of the crowd. How does that actually make them safer? Why do you think she said that? Don't forget, today's word of the day is lanky, which means tall and thin. The opposite of lanky would be stocky, which is what they describe Ellen as. So Anne-Marie is lanky, Ellen is stocky. And we will review all of this on Monday. Have a fantastic weekend. Happy Easter, everybody.